This is Brad Montgomery. Welcome to the Successful, Interesting, and Awesome podcast where I interview people who are, wait for it, successful, interesting, and awesome. Or at least one of those three. Hey everybody, it's Brad Montgomery. This podcast is called Successful, Interesting, and Awesome, and I'm so glad you're here. You're going to love this guest, and I'm going to tell you why I love this guest. I'm convinced that the planet is complicated right now. If you're like me, you feel overwhelmed. I can't tell you how many of my friends I've talked to and I say, are you reading the news? And most of them come up with, oh, I'm sort of aware of the headlines, but I don't tend to read it too much because it brings me down. Because it feels like we're a country divided politically. We're divided over healthcare right now with COVID, what to do about COVID, and whether or not there is COVID, and whether or not, whatever. We're divided over global warming and what to do about that. We just seem to argue about everything. We're seeing hate crimes against Asian Americans. We're seeing, you know what I'm talking about. So I think the answer really is to find somebody who's not like you and have a charming conversation with them and see if you can grow closer. Now, this guest I'm about to introduce, I didn't hear anything I disagree with. I think she's awesome. But it is also true that she's different from me because I'm a straight white dude in the suburbs and she's gay. That means we have a different life experience. And I thought it was really important for me to learn from her and to try to see the world through her eyes. And I hope you feel the same would be valuable to you. Sitting down with people who are different from us, I swear that can fix everything. It can fix things in your neighborhood. It can fix things in your community. And I think it can grow from there to literally changing the world. I know it feels sappy. Even as I said that, changing the world, as those words left my mouth, I thought, gosh, that is sappy. But I still believe it. It starts with conversations, sometimes difficult conversations, sometimes just charming conversations with people who don't think like you. See what you can learn. I'm so glad you're here. We're going to have a blast. Let's do this. And everybody, it's me, Brad. I've missed you. How are you? Are you washing your hands still? Please tell me you're washing your hands. And tell me you've got that shot. Have you got that shot? Delta is real, people. And I'm a little bit selfish. I'll tell you why. I've had some cancellations very, very recently because of the Delta variant. So that means I'm worried about COVID because I'm a human on this planet and I worry about our fellow planetary citizens. And I worry about COVID because it seems divisive when it shouldn't be. But also, just selfishly, I'm worried about COVID because, in March 2020, I went from a job I loved to unemployed. And seems to be happening again. I'm not sure. So get that shot, would you? All right. Now, that is the only important thing that I'm going to say because we're going to tune into my guest. Oh, am I excited about this woman? Now, this woman has had a really interesting job. She's kind of a inclusivity and diversity expert. I swear I'm going to learn those words. I'm going to learn them. But her path to being an expert and speaker in these things was non-traditional. She started out in the wedding industry, planning weddings in the LGBTQ plus space. So she had a big expertise there. And years ago, I'm thinking it was especially important to have somebody who knew how to navigate that corporate world. And today, we're very lucky because she's just put out her fourth book. Let's say that again. Did you say four? I said fourth book. And she's going to tell us about that too. Please welcome to your living room, to your front, to your kitchen table. Maybe it's your bed. I don't know where you're watching this. It's no judgment. Say hi to Bernadette.
Hello,
What's up,
everyone.
Bernadette
Hi,
Smith?
Brad.
I'm so glad you're here.
I'm thrilled to be here. I love talking to people, and I really love talking to you. So, really happy you invited me on your show.
Well, I just added your last name to your thing. You and I met very briefly at a professional conference for professional speakers. You and I are professional speakers. And it was just a very lovely, but too short interaction. And I'm really glad for this podcast, partly because I get to pepper you with questions and find out who you are. So
I'm thrilled. Yeah, I bring it on. I'm ready for it.
All right. So before we get into your job and the book, you and I, just before we started recording, we're talking about. I told you that I was a little worried about Delta, right? That my calendar is being affected in a rapid pace. And you said that you go and talk to yourself and give yourself a talking to. And I said, I give myself a talking to sometimes. Tell me about that. Do you have to struggle to be upbeat sometimes?
Well, fundamentally, I'm an optimist. Fundamentally, I am a very positive person. I always look for the lessons. I always look for the meaning, the silver linings. Frequently was looking for the silver linings, or have been throughout the COVID pandemic. So that's fundamentally who I am. I will say that I've talked to a number of people who are feeling similar to how I'm currently feeling, which is kind of eh, a little down, a little bit in a funk. I have no reason to be. My life is very good. I'm abundant. I have a book coming out. Like things are great. But still, I'm feeling a little funky. And one of the ways I deal with that is to give myself little pep talks and um, try to, what I say, get my head on straight. Except between you and me, Brad, I can't do anything straight.
But bump. And there is the first joke about LGBTQ. I think you walked me right into there, didn't you? Well,
I
yeah,
sure
it's weird
did.
because I too am a very positive person. If you ask anybody who knows me well, they're like, "Oh yeah, that guy is almost always the most positive, upbeat guy in the room." And so it feels a little odd to admit to myself, I'm not used to this. I'm not used to a little anxiety, and I'm not used to worrying about stuff. I'm used to being the guy who cheers other people up.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I'm trying to give myself permission to just be in this space. Yesterday, I didn't have any meetings at all, and I stayed in my robe all day. And I sat on the couch. I watched a little bit of TV, did a little bit of work, but I was in my robe for about 36 hours, and it was delightful.
That's pretty good. For me, it's jammy pants and Crocs, which
Whatever works, right?
my kids told me I'm not. I made a promise I will never wear Crocs out of the house, but oh, they are comfortable.
They sure are. Yeah. I mean, I don't have like a slanket or a, what are they, the Snuggies? Is that?
I bought one of those for my wife for Christmas. They're the
It
bomb.
ruins the romance. Are they?
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing sexy about a snuggie or snuggly or something like that. All right. Well, Bernadette Smith. Let's jump into you. You are the principal at the Equality Institute. You are an expert in diversity and inclusion. I don't. I need to know more about you. What I do know is you had an interesting intro to this world, and I mentioned it in the introduction of the podcast. What? You're a wedding expert?
I am a wedding expert, although I'm retired as a wedding expert essentially. But back in 2004, I started a business specializing in planning weddings for LGBTQ couples when marriage equality first became legal in Massachusetts, which was the first state in the country to have it. And so I started a business to become an activist wedding planner to help these couples navigate a very traditional industry and feel safe while doing so.
What's the difference, Bernadette, between a wedding planner and an activist wedding planner?
Well, I'm going to be honest that I never really got into it for the weddings. I was never one of those people that was like, oh, I love weddings. I'm a visual person. I have like mood boards. Like, no, that was never me. My vision for it was always about advocacy, making sure my clients felt safe, having their back, making sure their experience was free from discrimination, and helping them reinvent very heteronormative bride and groom traditions. So it was definitely a different angle. And actually, when I got to the point in my career in which I was planning, I did find myself at one point living in New York City planning six-figure weddings. And all of a sudden, I did not feel like an activist wedding planner anymore. I felt like a luxury wedding planner. And the reason that I got into it started becoming less and less important. And that's when I knew that it's time to start phasing out this part of my career.
Did you know where you were headed at the time?
Well, I'd already been doing speaking and training on LGBTQ plus inclusion in the wedding and hospitality industries. I had written 3 books. The last book was for wedding and travel professionals. I'd done a lot of speaking at conferences, created an online certificate course. So I knew that I was going to be in the speaking, training, thought leadership space in some capacity. What that looked like, what kind of led to a professional identity crisis, and experimenting with different things, not having very much patience for the long game, and eventually figuring it out. But it took some time.
How hard was it to walk away from planning six-figure weddings? Because that strikes me as that could be the golden handcuff right there.
Yeah, you know what? It there were a lot of things happening at once. My wife at the time told me that she didn't want to be married to me anymore, so I went through my own divorce
Mm.
and subsequent move. And so, in order for me to really maintain that business, I should have been continuing to live in New York City and maintaining the client relationships there and wedding professional relationships there. And I didn't. I didn't go back. I didn't maintain those relationships because ultimately it would have been a lot of work. I was trying to rebuild my life in Chicago, didn't really want to start planning weddings in my third new city. just it just kind of felt like, all right, time has come. I'm just going to let things phase out organically. I mean, I think I had one wedding in like 2019 or so. So a couple of years ago I may have had one wedding. And it was at the Four Seasons in Manhattan, and it was spectacular. It was my last wedding, actually. But at that point it was just sort of like, we'll just see what comes in, but it's not how I'm going to market myself. It's not the part of my career that I'm focusing on.
Got it. Well, I saw from the website that um, so talking to the people within the wedding industry started leading to people saying, "Oh, wait, this woman's brilliant. We need her to talk to other portions of our business." Is that right? Did I read that right?
Yeah, that's sort of how it worked. And it was really about LGBTQ inclusion when I was talking to other parts of their business. What eventually happened is I started speaking and training about non LGBTQ diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. And ultimately, I just kind of closed the door on hospitality and travel and weddings altogether. I mean, I don't really speak in those to those industries at all anymore.
Okay, well, we've done it. We've already changed. Then we're talking about your current business. Tell us about the Equality Institute. What in the heck do you do? And I was blown away when I went to your website because not only are you a rock star, you've got an army of rock stars.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really proud of the team that I've built. And that's been a work in progress. I mean, and even defining what Equality Institute is becoming is still a work in progress, right? I mean, as a business owner, there's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of um, just trying things out and seeing what sticks. And also for me, trusting the universe and, and seeing what signs I should follow. But at the end of the day, Equality Institute is a consulting firm that focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we do that in a few different ways. We do consulting projects in which our consultant will go in and do a complete diversity, equity, and inclusion analysis and strategic plan and other things, especially for organizations very new to this topic. We can help them get started. We offer a whole bunch of different workshops facilitated by me and some other folks on my team, and I do keynote speaking. And that is my very favorite thing to do is speak, not workshops. I still do workshops, but my favorite thing to do is be on stage and deliver a speech. And I love it. And that's the part of the business that I'm most passionate about and that I personally invest in. But fortunately, I have a really great team who take the lead on the other stuff, and it's fun. It's really fun to know that we're making an impact together collectively.
Well, let's talk about your keynote speaking. Partly because I understand it the best. uh,
Hmm.
when a client calls and says, "Bernadette, we need you," and it's a perfect client, what is that client, and what are you talking about?
I'd love to talk to associations because with associations, they might have member organizations who could also be a good fit for the rest of the work, right? Especially the consulting work, and certainly workshops. But a lot of the type of work we've been getting have been in the industries of banking, finance, investments. That seems to be the industries that are calling most. Some tech, and some also agencies, marketing and ad agencies. So those are the types of clients we seem to be getting the most work on. But a perfect client really is a client who trusts me, who knows that they want to both inspire their audience to take action in a practical way. So my what I have to offer is a very entertaining, dynamic keynote, but is also very practical. I want folks to actually have tools that they can put into use, that they can bring back to their own organizations, and I want them to feel like that they have the power to do this, that they can be inspired and have ownership over this themselves. Everyone has a role to play.
Well, let's get into the details. Like, all right, so I'm a bank, and someone tells me I need more inclusivity in my bank. I don't know what that means. What do you tell me? Why? Or if I'm having that conversation, like, I think I'm supposed to do this to check a box. Why? What am I doing?
Well, we want to make sure we make the case. We want to make sure that the leaders really buy into this so that they can communicate the initiatives to the rest of the organization and they can find their own reason for doing this. And we try to make that personal. I mean, I can spend a few minutes with you and talk like, what is your why around diversity? How is it personal for you? And that's the kind of conversation I have with leaders. Is it because you have a gay son or a biracial grandchild, or because you witness something horrible that you never want someone else to go through? So we start by kind of uncovering the why and giving them a lot of ways they can make the case, whether it's the financial benefits of diversity and inclusion on teams, or the fact that millennials and Gen Z at a very high level value diversity and inclusion when they're looking for new jobs. Like, these are the types of things that can help organizations make the case and feel like, all right, well, we have the buy-in. Now let's get into solutions mode. Well, we can't quite get into solutions mode yet because we don't know where they are.
Right.
So on a consulting level, that's where the assessment piece comes in. When I'm doing the keynote, I talk to them about asking better questions. We can't make assumptions of what the current state is. We actually have to ask better questions. And I provide a contextual model called the ARC method in my keynote that is a tool for asking better questions, both of your organization, so you can figure out that current state and get into action, but also to get clarity in any situation, in any interpersonal relationship with a coworker, colleague.
Dang it,
What
you
I
sound smart.
found,
But at this
what's
point,
that?
you sound smart. At this point in the conversation, you'd already be booked. If if I
Thank you.
was Mr. C suite. Well, tell me a little bit about you. When did you come out? Because clearly,
I
your personal experience has driven both businesses.
Yes, I came out in 2004. No, geez, no. I started my business in 2004. I came out in 1994. That was a long time ago, Brad. When I was a first year college student at Boston University, I came to Boston from a small town, and it was literally like the blinders came off pretty much as soon as I set foot on campus. I could admit to myself that uh, those feelings that I had towards some girls were actual, like, legit crushes.
Hmm.
and um, ultimately I became a student leader, and yes, like, I'm a super gay. Like, Brad, I'm like probably one of the gayest people you'll ever meet. Like, yeah, I'm
Okay,
very, very
okay.
gay.
So when you're talking to a white suburban straight guy, what's super gay mean?
I mean, it's obviously part of my professional identity, right? I work with a lot of, I speak on LGBTQ topics still. I work with LGBTQ employee resource groups as part of some of the work we do. And it's a part of my identity that I lead with. It's a part of my identity that I talk about in my keynote and I make fun of myself for. I actually have a little bit in my keynote about being super gay. Because a lot of my keynote is actually about the assumptions we make about others,
Hmm.
and the assumptions that others make about us. And one of the mistaken assumptions that I talk about in my keynote is when my super gay powers failed me and my gaydar was broken and I hit on someone who was straight. And so my my gaydar was broken because gaydar is based in assumptions.
Ah,
And assumptions are a form of a stereotype, right? So that's kind of how I talk about being super gay.
yeah,
You following?
yeah. It just makes me want to ask like 10 more questions.
Sure, fire away.
So I would like to ask you about gaydar. So let's put a pin in that. But let's go back to your freshman year.
Sure.
You left a small town to go to Boston.
Small town in the Hudson Valley in New York.
Did you know, like, oh, I'm going to go to college out of town so I can come out?
No, I knew that I wanted to have a big city experience. I knew that I was a the world is my oyster kind of person. Big dreams. I also knew that I wasn't ready for New York City yet, and so Boston felt like a good, easy stepping stone.
New York City light.
Exactly.
Well, because I'm just trying to picture that decision or that realization, like, oh, I can be openly gay as a young person. Because I just assume if I'm gay in a small town, I'd want to get out of that small town and I'd want to move to a city. So I just assumed that was part of the coming out process. But I think I'm wrong.
It's because there were really no possibility models. It wasn't really an option. It wasn't like I didn't know anyone who was gay. Really, if I had a male friend in high school who was bisexual, but I didn't really know anyone, and so it wasn't like there wasn't. This was pre Ellen coming out. Like even in the media, there were no possibility models, no examples, and so for it was just taboo. Really, it was, and we're still in the AIDS epidemic. Like there were it was a tough there were a lot of reasons that I didn't have that self-awareness when I was in high school.
When did you come out to yourself?
Pretty much as soon as I set foot on campus, September
Oh,
94
so it
at
was a duo.
college.
You were coming out publicly and in your own head.
Yeah, I sort of came out in my own head pretty much September, and then I came out to my first person publicly on October 11th, which is National Coming Out Day. I came out to my mom that following February or so, and the rest of my siblings immediately thereafter. So it was all pretty quick. I don't do anything slowly, Brad.
Well, I'm curious, what was the response for that first chance you took to come out? And then what was the response of your family?
The response of my peers, I came out to some peers in college, was nonchalant, like totally supportive. I came out to my roommate, she was very supportive. She and I had a great relationship. It really wasn't a big deal. When I came out to my mom, who was an off the boat Irish woman, and I went to Catholic school for many years, um, her response to me was first, I will love you no matter what. And then let's get you in therapy. And so she thought that it was a phase. She thought that I was trying to be cool, that I was trying to find my identity, and that
Hmm.
this was, just part of exploration of that.
That's got to hurt when your mom thinks it's a phase.
You know, I was really okay because first of all, she led with "I will love you no matter what," but she also, at this point, my mom, I'm the youngest by 12 years, and my parents had me when they were in their early 40s. And so at this point, my mom is like 60 years old, and I'd only known myself for a few months. And so I gave her a lot of grace. I gave her the phone number of PFLAG. I did agree to go to the therapist. And I just was like, you know what? Everyone's on their own path. And that's how I feel about diversity work, Brad. I feel like everyone's on their own path. Everyone has a different set of lived experiences, which is informing how they view the world, how they react to these different conversations, what can trigger them. And you know what? I'm not the type of speaker who is going to be aggressive. I'm a very I want to meet people where they're at. I'm a very like chill kind of person about these things, which I think is why people like me.
Well, I like
I'm
you.
not going to judge you. I'm not going to judge you for what you don't know. Thank you.
Thank you for not judging me. On the other hand, I'm totally judging you right now. I'm not. I'm not. I'm joking. What was that counseling like? So you come out, your mom says counseling, you say, "All right, I agree, mom." Were you in there just going, "Whatever, I need to do enough sessions to get mom off my back," or were you? What was going on in your head?
Well, I made an appointment with a counselor in my home area during spring break. And I drove myself over there, and I don't know how I found the counselor, but I think it was just through like the HMO. Um, and so I basically like laid it all out there, and I'm pretty sure that the counselor was a lesbian, but I don't know for sure. I think she may have been. Um, my gaydar was going off.
Right.
Anyway, I basically laid it out there. Like, this is how I feel. I had crushes on girls in high school. I joined the LGBTA in college, and like, whatever. I was just like very honest. I, I had my story, and I was authentic, and I owned it. And she was like, "All right, well, here's the name of a local newspaper, 1 in 10," and she gave me some resources. And then I basically went home and I said to my mom, "Hey, mom, I'm still gay." And that was that. She let it go. It really wasn't a big thing. And also, I think at that point she had realized that her sister had a gay son, two gay sons ultimately, and so that she wasn't alone in this.
Right.
Um, she did say to me originally, like, "Don't tell anyone," and she didn't want my dad to find out. So, as far as I know, he died a couple years later. Not, I never had that conversation with him anyway.
Mm.
And so, there is a bit of that stuff. But at the end of the day, I had it really good. I mean, I'm a very confident person, Brad, or at least I'm perceived as a very confident person. And I don't get challenged all that much on a lot of things. So feel free to challenge me if you'd like.
Well, I'm just trying to think of what challenging means. So when you say you haven't been challenged much, what has not happened?
I mean, I'm a determined entrepreneur person, and I'm the youngest child, and I pretty much do whatever the hell I want. And I don't have a lot of people who say, "Hey, you shouldn't do this," or "Hey, I don't have a lot of people like that in my life, for better or worse.
Well, clearly it's driven part of your success, right? That confidence is paying.
Sure, I'm sure.
Plus, you're charming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
It all
So
works out. I do have a track record of things mostly working out.
tell me about this. And I'm entering the scary land, Bernadette, where I fear that I'm going to say something stupid and I'm going to embarrass myself and offend you and our listeners. So if that happens,
Don't worry about it.
so it feels to me as a pretty sheltered straight guy that I just started learning about a lot of words really recently. And so that begs the question, how much of this has existed forever and how much of this is privilege? For example, this is just unsubstantiated opinion. It seems like kids in college have a lot of time to think, right? And so they're like, oh, and they're trying on new ideas of all different types. And so it wouldn't be totally surprising for them to say, oh, let's try on some ideas related to LGBTQ plus and whatever else. But the other part of me says, Brad, that's nonsense because this has been around since the dawn of time. Can you find a question in there? Like, is any of this new, or is it just suddenly we have a vocabulary around it?
Well, historically speaking, gay and trans folks and third gender have been part of history and cultures around the world for centuries. So, historically speaking, especially way back, in the era of Alexander the Great and Sappho from the Isle of Lesbos is a lesbian poet. Like back then, it really wasn't a big deal in that time. The first laws against homosexuality were passed in the fourth century by Christian emperors, and then things started to go downhill, and including during the Holocaust when there was a big roundup of gays who were put in concentration camps. And so, there was definitely some really dark times, but before that, we were just, out and about. And I think that that's sort of how we're coming back to, is just being out and about with fewer labels, or maybe that's not quite right. There might be more labels, but there are a lot more folks who are also willing to kind of go be anti-label, yet still take a label. And specifically, I mean the word queer. So when I came out a long time ago, the word queer was really derogatory. It was really hateful. It was hurtful. But more recently, it's been reclaimed and it's used as an umbrella term. And I consider queer to be kind of the anti-label label for people who don't like labels, who don't fit neatly into boxes regarding their sexuality or their gender. Then the label they might choose is queer, because it's not just two boxes. It's not just male or female. It's not just straight or gay. It's all a spectrum, and it all sort of fits under the label queer. So as far as the LGBTQ stuff goes, I think that there are a lot more folks, young folks in particular, who are willing to, who feel safe enough to self-identify in that way, because there are a lot more folks who are out. There are a lot more celebrities who are out. There's a lot more mainstream acceptance. There are more protections in terms of laws. So there's a lot more permission for folks to be themselves authentically. So we're seeing the numbers in Gen Z and millennials go up dramatically. When I came out, it was 1 in 10, and now it's like 1 in 3.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's way higher than I would have guessed.
Yeah. 1 in 3 Gen Z identify as LGBTQ plus, which means they're not exclusively straight and they're not exclusively male or female, or
Right.
male or female. Yeah.
That's where I think what you were saying, having an umbrella term, could be really handy. It's like,
Yeah.
that's complicated. Well, so let's talk about labels, because you've used the word gay describing yourself, and you talked about your therapist, counselor being a possible lesbian. Which terms do
hmm
you use for yourself, and why are those important?
I use the terms gay and lesbian for myself primarily. Sometimes I use the word queer. I I don't really care whether it's gay or lesbian personally. I'm not hung up on that type of stuff at all. Um, yeah, I guess that's just me. I just feel like very comfortable in my own skin. And I feel also like completely a woman. And I don't have any gender identity confusion or fluidity there either, even though I might have a more androgynous, slightly androgynous gender expression.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'm with you.
I personally am okay with boxes and I'm okay with the binary. And there are a lot of folks 20 years younger than me who aren't.
Right.
And that's cool.
Right. Well, so one of my fears as a straight white guy is, and hopefully increasingly less clueless, but still big elements of clueless. My fear is that I would insult somebody by using wrong labels and wrong pronouns, wrong everything. So, for example, if I'm describing my friend Bernadette, I would be in a tizzy trying to say if it came up that she's gay or she's lesbian, and I don't know which, and then I would try to find a. I would.
So
I'd
you want me
just
to
fudge
tell
because I
you?
wouldn't want to use either word, and for fear I'd screw it up.
So you want me to tell you exactly what to say, Brad? I can do that.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love that decoding so that I know what
Sure,
to do, how I can be better.
sure. And I'm glad. You know what? What you modeled was great because you asked. You admitted what you don't know, and you asked a question to get clarity.
Oh,
Cool. It's simple as that, right? But not a lot of people are willing to say those words. So I'm going to respect your question. I'm going to respect what you said, and I'm going to say, all right, well, honestly, probably to keep things simple, the best word to use to describe me is lesbian. Thank you so much for asking. There we go. We followed the ARC method just then, Brad.
Okay,
You
but
didn't even realize it.
thank you for the compliment, but really it's you that are making me comfortable. Plus, we're in a unique situation. This is a podcast where, I mean, we're about to talk about your book. Like, this is all the relationship we're having right now in this interview is not normal. We're not at a cocktail party. Do I still do that at a cocktail party?
Yeah, you can do that at a cocktail party. You might ask in a different way. You might have a little bit more curiosity or a little bit different tone. Like you can totally change the type of question you ask and the vulnerability you bring to it, depending on the context, depending on whether it's a superior or a subordinate, depending on whether it's an
Oh,
acquaintance or someone you know well. And ultimately, if you ask the question from a place of curiosity and not confrontation and not judgment, you're probably going to get a really respectful answer and you're going to have a respectful dialogue. But I think that a lot of folks are afraid of asking the question. And that is actually a big part of what I talk about in my keynote and in my book. So thanks for teeing me up. Because what I believe, Brad, is that like you, many really awesome, well-meaning folks want to find the right words. They want to say the right thing, but they are afraid of saying the wrong thing. They're afraid of accidentally offending someone. And so they don't say anything, right? And I know that I've been in that situation myself because for years, I thought I was an ally to Black people, to people with disabilities. I thought, like, yeah, I'm like all in, I'm a total ally. But I was still afraid of saying the wrong thing. I was still afraid of accidentally offending someone. Anytime I'd be invited to like a Black Lives Matter rally or a fundraiser for an inner city school, I'd be like, I have my thing. I do the gay thing. That's my thing. And I did not use my words. I did not use my power, my privilege, my curiosity to ask questions. I just stayed in my gay lane. So I wasn't really an ally because I wasn't afraid. I didn't have the words to use. So your curiosity and your vulnerability in admitting what you don't know is an amazing approach that I hope others are inspired by. It's totally okay to ask. Don't ask something you can look up on Google, and don't ask something that could be perceived as like extra nosy, like someone transgender's like surgery plans, like that's invasive, right?
right.
um, but starting from a place of curiosity, not confrontation, is incredibly powerful. And it shows that you really want to get to know someone better. It's about connection.
Isn't it funny that you're making me feel so good when you're the person doing all the work?
It's thank you for saying that. It's amazing how many folks struggle to find the words. And I definitely found it a lot when I've done any LGBTQ presentation over the past, 15 years. It's like, oh, well, I'm afraid of messing up the letters. I've heard that for years and years. And I know in my experience, I've been afraid of messing up. Is it Black? Is it African American? Is it people of color? Like what word, what phrase should I be using? Right.
Right, right.
I've been that way myself. And so these themes are universal, whatever those words are, or the words that we don't have are. And the solution is to ask better questions. It's really as simple as that, but also to respect the answers and then to connect by fulfilling the promise you made by asking the question.
I can't I can't imagine any organization not wanting you as a keynote speaker. Dang it, you're good.
Thank
Mm.
you. Thank you. That's really kind of you to say, Brad. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's so much fun. So much fun. And it's my purpose. And it took me a really long time to admit that this is the part of my career that I care about the most, that I'm the best at, and that I want to invest in. It took me a while to figure that out, but now there's no turning back. I'm in.
Well, I know that you have written 4 books, and your last one is it must be just recently out. Can you tell us about it?
Yes,
Oh, there it
Inclusive
is.
360, Proven Solutions for an Equitable Organization, comes out
Inclusive,
on, I gotta get it in
inclu-
front of my webcam.
inclusive. Well, don't forget, some people are going to be
There we
listening to
go.
this.
Okay.
Wait, tell me the
Inclusive
subtitle.
360,
Inclusive 360. What's the subtitle?
Proven Solutions for an Equitable Organization. It comes out on September 21st, so I'm not sure when this is airing, but it's September 21st that it's out. You can get more information at inclusive360book.com. It's available for pre-order now. And I wrote the book because I want to be able to, well, first of all, let me be completely transparent here. I wrote the book to get over my own imposter syndrome
Oh,
and moving away from the wedding space and moving into these other, talking to other industries and not just talking about LGBTQ inclusion. I had a lot of hangups around I've never worked for a corporation. Like, what do I know? Why am I going to be taken seriously? I
mm,
came from weddings. Aren't weddings shallow, like superficial? Like, what do I know? That was all my stuff. So I wrote this book to prove that I know. And it feels great. I love this book. So I wrote it for organizations, especially early on in their diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. Many of them don't know where to start. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. They're afraid of missteps. And this book is kind of a DIY DEI. It's a way that organizations can establish their baseline and then get into solutions mode. It has everything from data to help make the case, stories about how to establish your own personal why on the DEI journey, and then just like tons of solutions on how to increase diversity in your hiring, how to increase diversity in promotions, how to increase diversity in product design and representation. So it's not just a book about HR, it's a book about a
mm.
360 approach to increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is packed full of solutions because I want to remove the excuses for not doing this work.
Sold. One of the things that might surprise you, the thing that you said that just struck me and kind of hit me hard is when you said, "I love this book." That is what every author. That's like the dream. You want to be able to say that.
Yeah, the editing process was a nightmare for a lot of reasons. And as a result, I've read this book many times and I still really like it. I still think it's fantastic and I still think it can make a huge impact. So I'm super proud of it. It feels really, it's like a nice book too. It feels great. I love the cover. Like, yeah, I'm so proud of this book.
That makes me happy to hear.
Thank you.
Self-published, or did you go with the publisher?
I self-published mostly because the publisher that I was going to work with had terrible terms, so that didn't feel good to me. And also, I just really wanted to have a lot more control over the process.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well, it seems like
it
that
feels
used to
good.
be such a self-published 25 years ago meant, oh, you couldn't get a publisher. And now it's like, hello, book business is complicated. Having
It's
control is a big
complicated,
deal.
yeah. And even having a publisher, they don't help with any of the marketing. Like it's
No.
at the end of the day, they don't provide an awful lot of support at all.
Or they say they're going to support and they don't.
Right. Right.
Well, let's just pretend your platform is large, but let's pretend it's not. Let's pretend this is your moment to tell the world that thing we need to know. What is it? And also, would it be a different message if you're talking to a heteronormative crowd? I hope I said that right. Versus a LGBTQ crowd. What's the message from Bernadette Smith?
The message is that every single one of us has a role to play in creating a more equitable world. And it doesn't matter if you have hangups about your race or your sexual orientation, or you have medical issues, or if you have financial problems, or if you have a sick kid, or whatever it happens to be, because we all have something, it should not be an excuse for failing to show up for those who have even less than us. I believe that is our responsibility. It's using whatever privilege we have, even if it's not very much, especially the unearned advantages, the unearned privileges we have, using that to show up for others. We all have a role to play. It's not just the role of managers and leaders.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a Bernadette Smith mic drop. Boom! We got to pull that quote out. You're a genius. All right. Well, I end every podcast the same way, and we're getting close to that moment. But before we get to this question that I'm going to ask you, dang it, I'm so grateful that you said yes to this. I'm so glad to know you better.
Thank you. Me too.
You're like a bundle of joy in all the best ways.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Brad. I think we have great energy together. So it's awesome to do this with you. Thank you.
I feel like I have a new friend.
Absolutely.
Well, all right. So here we are. Bernadette Smith, leader of the Equality Institute, expert in diversity, inclusivity, equity.
It's okay. All good. It's
Leader
okay
of
to
those
get the
things,
words wrong. It's okay.
DEI. So diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yep.
Leader in DEI, rock star, and very charming, funny person. What gives you hope?
A lot of things give me hope. I'm perpetually in seeking hope. What gives me hope are a lot of people doing great stuff. I'm very hopeful about Gen X. Gen X is me. I'm not hopeful about Gen X. I'm more hopeful about Gen Z. Gen Z leads with this passion for equality and inclusion, and they give me a lot of hope. And I have some of them in my family, and it's really cool to see their own passions. Beyond that, there are a lot of really powerful organizations doing great stuff. There really are organizations that are leading the way, that are creating greater equity, that are achieving gender parity, that are seeing massive amounts of increase of support of Black-owned brands, like a lot of really cool stuff happening. And I have so much hope that every Saturday morning I send out a newsletter with 5 of those stories of really cool companies doing inspiring DEI stuff every single Saturday, unless I'm on vacation. It's called 5 Things. And then we talk about these hopeful, inspiring stories on LinkedIn Live every Monday. It's called 5 Things in 15 Minutes. And those types of stories are the stories which are the foundation of this book. It's all about hope. It's all about positive solutions, getting into action. There's so much inspiration around if we're just willing to look for it. But our brains get cluttered by the negative stories, by the negative data, by the news cycle. That I tune out to that. I mean, I'm aware of the headlines, but sometimes I don't go deeper.
Yeah, you're a breath of fresh air in all the best ways. You're good for me because we all need to be around people that are upbeat, right? And if we're lucky, it rubs off. And I feel like some of that rubbed off on me. Hearing you just talk about, let's focus on the people in front of us. Let's talk about positive solutions and positive examples and spread that word and take baby steps.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, and there's a fine line. Like, I realize that I can be like borderline toxic positivity. So
I've never heard that. That's awesome.
I try not to spend too much time in that space. I realize it can be annoying. But you know what? I think ultimately we need to just focus on what's going right and be inspired by that and look for the best practices there.
I had a buddy, Bernadette, recently called me Ted Lasso. Brad, you're Ted Lasso. And he did not mean that as a compliment.
He didn't?
No, and I'm like, oh, thanks so much. And he's like, yeah, Ted Lasso's a pain in the ass. He's too positive. I'm like, what? All right, well, listen, you are a rock star. So everybody, I'm talking to you, everybody. Do me a couple of favors. One, check out Bernadette. We're going to go to theequalityinstitute.com. Did I get that? Yeah, I did. theequalityinstitute.com. That's your first thing, to learn more about Bernadette. Second thing is, do me a favor, would you? Go to Apple Podcasts and hit a review for this, would you? It's a small thing, but it means a lot. I just wanted my camera to went out of focus just as I'm asking for your help. Just share this on social media. I'm so excited, and thank you for all of your emails, and thank you for all of the calls. I had no idea, but it's time to show that love online, because that helps me too. All right, Bernadette, stay with me for a second. I'm so glad you're here. The world needs more of you. Your rocket ship is on the way, girl.
I appreciate it. The world needs positivity in general, right? And you bring it too. So I appreciate you.